What do we do with Syria? What do we do with Syria's chemical weapons? Have they crossed a red line, or is our president just blowing smoke? Well, that's the question we're going to be answering today. The president said he still wants more evidence that Syria is using chemical weapons before he makes a decision.
Pat, the world is watching to see what the U.S. does in Syria, while Israel also has to decide if it will take military action against Iran. Chris Mitchell has a story from Jerusalem.
Syrian opposition groups released this video showing what they say are some of the dozens of people killed or sickened in a chemical weapons attack by the Assad government. Back in March, President Obama issued a warning.
To use potential weapons of mass destruction on civilian populations crosses another line, and that is going to be a game changer.
Since then, British, French, and Israeli intelligence all concluded that the Assad government did conduct a chemical attack. And last week, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel agreed. But the White House is reluctant to call it a game changer for the U.S. in Syria.
Now, we are working to establish credible and corroborated facts to build on this intelligence assessment in order to establish a definitive judgment as to whether or not the president's red line has been crossed, and to inform our decision-making about next steps.
Israeli Middle East analyst Jonathan Spire says both U.S. friends and foes in the region are watching.
It's now very apparent that the regime has used chemical weapons on a number of occasions, which means that if the United States now fails to act on its clear red line, then of course conclusions will be drawn in that regard by all other players in the region, including some players very hostile to the United States, such as Iran.
One option in the U.S. arsenal: strikes from the air or sea on the Syrian chemical weapons facilities and production plants scattered throughout the country. But that is a subject the administration won't address in the media. President Obama's red line on Syria is a big enough problem for the Middle East, but here in Jerusalem, Prime Minister Netanyahu has to deal with an even more dangerous red line, the one leading to a nuclear Iran.
A red line should be drawn right here. Before Iran completes the second stage of nuclear enrichment necessary to make a bomb.
Just months after Netanyahu's red line speech to the UN last fall, former Israeli military intelligence chief Amos Yadlin said that Iran has now crossed that red line, or is at least right at the threshold. The U.S. red line involves Iran actually building a weapon, while the Israeli red line tries to prevent Iran from getting nuclear capability, and before it reaches the breakout stage of producing a weapon.
The red line has been crossed. A lot now depends on the Iranian decision in this regard, and certainly Israel will be watching very, very carefully.
So, while Western governments debate what they might do, Israel is strengthening its defenses in the Golan Heights, on a border with Syria that has been mostly quiet for 40 years, because the red lines being talked about now in Washington appear to lead straight to Israel's borders. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Excellent report. Ladies and gentlemen, we can get caught up in our rhetoric, and our leaders must be careful about rhetoric. Like when they say something is unacceptable, it cannot be acceptable. When something is a red line and it gets crossed, then they've got to act. And if they don't act, they lose credibility. Better to keep your mouth shut than to make these bold pronouncements. But those things sound good in speeches, and they sound good in little news clips. But they've got to be followed up on, and so the world is watching. If Assad backs down on it, excuse me, if Obama backs down on this, we've got a problem. But if he moves forward, what does he do? If we give aid to the rebels, many of them are associated with Al-Qaeda. If we go in and bomb the chemical facilities, we run the risk of spreading chemical plumes all over the area that might go into Jordan and Israel. So what do? How do we handle it? We certainly don't want to put troops in there. So it's a difficult situation, and the president should have realized that it was a swamp he was walking into, and he was liable to get stuck in the muck. Well, the U.S. is learning more about what led up to the Boston bombings. And it doesn't reflect too much credit these days on the intelligence phase of our government because they knew things and they didn't act on them. Here's Lee Webb with more on that.
You're right, Pat. Investigators are uncovering new clues about what inspired the older bombing suspect. They say Tamerlan Tsarnaev traveled to a notorious mosque in Dagestan last year and met a Chechen terror recruiter by the name of Ansur Nadal. Russian authorities killed Nadal last year in a shootout. Here in the U.S., investigators also continue their search for possible accomplices. They've identified nearly a dozen persons of interest, including Tamerlan's widow. And the London Daily Mail reports that Saudi Arabia warned the U.S. in writing about Tamerlan just last year. A Saudi letter to Homeland Security reportedly named Tamerlan and 3 Pakistanis as potential jihadis. Pat?
I worry about any message going to Homeland Security. It may be some maw that you throw things in where things just get lost and destroyed. I think Homeland Security is too big. You know, George Bush, when he was president, I'm sure that he learned somewhere in business school that what you do is make more efficient things when you compress agencies. So he got all of these disparate agencies and he jammed them all together. And we said, yippee, we've got Homeland Security, now we're all safe. Instead of that, we fouled up agency after agency, and the bureaucrats aren't functioning with each other like they should. The Homeland Security is a joke. What you see at airports is an absolute disgrace. And so here's intelligence, you know, being obtained and then disregarded because these agencies aren't talking to each other. And this grand experiment in mashing together agencies to make them, quote, more efficient didn't work. So anyhow, score 1 for the Gipper. Here's Lee.
Pat, the American pastor imprisoned for his Christian faith in Iran is now in solitary confinement. Family members confirm that Saeed Abedini was placed there. 9 other prisoners are also being confined. The American Center for Law and Justice says the move comes after Abedini and others petitioned Evin Prison on account of its horrible conditions. Since his imprisonment last fall, the pastor has developed internal bleeding, and there are fears his kidneys are failing. To find out how you can help Pastor Saeed, go to cbnnews.com. Teenagers as young as 15 will now be able to buy one brand of the Plan B morning after pill. The Food and Drug Administration says the drug can sit on drugstore shelves along with other women's products. But buyers must prove they're 15 or older at the cash register. Before the change, buyers had to be 17 and had to ask a pharmacist or a doctor for it. Social conservatives, though, oppose the move. They argue that parents and medical professionals should be involved in major medical decisions involving young girls. A deadly strain of gonorrhea could be as dangerous as AIDS. The bacteria is now considered a superbug because it's resistant to antibiotics. One medical expert tells CNBC.com that someone who gets gonorrhea from this particular bug could go into septic shock and die within days. Right now, doctors do not have anything to fight this bug. The number of infections is low now, but experts, Pat, say it could become a disaster.
They discovered this from what is called, they used to call them prostitutes, now they're sex workers. A sex worker in Japan had this thing, whatever it is. And kids today think, hey, I can have unprotected sex. If it's syphilis, I just get a shot and it gets cured. If I get gonorrhea, it's no problem. I just get a shot, a little penicillin, everything's fine, go back to my life. We're talking about life-threatening. AIDS is bad enough, and there's one that's as bad as AIDS. And maybe people will finally be terrified that their immoral behavior has extraordinary physical consequences. Let's hope maybe some people might get scared straight. Lee?
Marks the annual National Day of Prayer. People will gather to pray in Washington as well as venues across America. This year's theme is Pray for America. The theme verse is Matthew 12:21. It repeats the prophetic words found in Isaiah. In his name, the nations will put their hope. And for more on the National Day of Prayer, let's go back to Pat.
Well, this is an annual event, and we are very pleased that Shirley Dobson is with us now from Washington. She's the chairman of the National Day of Prayer. And Shirley, it's always a delight to see you. We congratulate you on your work. Tell us about this year's Day of Prayer. What do you got planned?
Pat, thank you, and thanks to CBN for supporting the National Day of Prayer. You know, we can all see, Pat, you've been talking about it earlier, that our country is sliding into moral chaos. Marriage is on the ropes. Since 1973, 55 million babies have been killed, and violence and terrorism stalk our streets. And so American people are very scared. That's what we're hearing in our office. And so for that reason, they realize that government doesn't have the answer, business or education or military. Those are all important centers of power, but they don't have the answers. The solution is God. The solution is turning back to the biblical understanding of what this country was founded on. And so from all indications, we're going to have a huge turnout this year, more than 42,000 prayer gatherings across the nation, some small, some large. But I just want to encourage our viewers, wherever you are on this National Day of Prayer, to lift up our nation, our leaders, our families, our churches, our children's schools, and our children. This nation needs prayer, Pat.
Shirley, where will they go if they want to participate as well, besides just praying in their homes? Are there designated locations?
Well, they need to go to our website, www.nationaldayofprayer.org, to find out if there's a prayer gathering near them. And if not, invite some neighbors over and have a time of prayer. Our website has prayer guides that can help them. The important thing is to lift up this nation in prayer. That is the answer.
Shirley, one personal question before you leave us. Your husband is aging normally like the rest of us. You seem to be getting younger. What's your secret?
Well, I was asked that earlier, and I said, you know, Max Factor does wonders. But Jim exercises every day. He has not slowed down a bit. Yeah. He's on a little bit of a diet now, and he's looking great. And he just has a lot of energy like you, Pat. I think he's going to see the Lord one of these days with a microphone in his hand.
Well, that's well, I'm heading to 100, so we're on the way, maybe 110. We'll see what happens. But thank you for your emphasis, and I'm sure many will be joining together on tomorrow's special National Day of Prayer. Shirley Dobson, yes. God bless you.
Thank you, Pat.
Well, if you'd like more information on how you can be a part of the National Day of Prayer, just go to the website, our website, cbnnews.com. And I have a lovely lady with me, and you're getting younger and more beautiful all the time, too, aren't you?
I'm looking for $1 to pay you, because I love that compliment. I will pay for that every time, brother.
A U.S. government panel that tracks religious freedom says China, Saudi Arabia, North Korea, and Iran are among the world's worst violators. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom advises the U.S. State Department. Commission head Katrina Lantos-Sweat says some of the worst persecution occurs where it's illegal to change religions or commit blasphemy. Muslims who convert to Christianity can face the death penalty in Iran. An atheist group wants the Pentagon to block officers from sharing their faith with subordinates. Mikey Weinstein of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation recently met with high-ranking Pentagon officials. He says even a Christian bumper sticker on an officer's car or a Bible on a desk can amount to, quote, pushing this fundamentalist version of Christianity on helpless subordinates. Weinstein said officers who do that should face a court-martial. The Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty says restrictions on religious practice will discriminate against evangelicals. Reverend Ron Cruz wants equal time to share his concerns with Pentagon officials. You can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.